show it for what it is.
Yeah. Okay, so this.
If you're going to be so persuasive, you're trying to kill all these Christians, you can at least try to persuade some people about Jesus in some ways because he was so bold.
Okay. Yeah, and that's exactly what I'm thinking. God didn't say, okay, now that you're a believer, Paul, now that you're a follower of Christ, we're going to get rid of this passion, right? This fiery, this anger, right? No. God redirected it, okay? Redirected it to use for God's glory. Now, obviously, there are certain limitations now that I'm sure Paul can't just blow up whenever. God doesn't want that either. But God is going to use that for his kingdom, right? So yes, good job, Liz. And Colin. Okay, so the next slide is how many smiley faces did you put? Who is one?
Those are the only three.
Those are the only three. Okay, we'll see. Who is one of the Gentiles Peter referred to in verse 7b? Cornelius. You got that right. Did you skip 7? Oh, no. Okay. Find the phrase a good while ago. Verse 7, how long ago is this? And he got this right. Date of council was AD 49. So what is the Council of Jerusalem? I guess I haven't actually specifically said that. It's easy to read over this sometimes and not actually talk about what it was. Brandon.
All the elders and apostles of the church.
Okay. And what were they talking about?
The debate about circumcision in this chapter.
The debate about circumcision and keeping the law of Moses, and whether or not that is necessary for salvation. This is probably the first council that the church has had. And later on, there are many other councils. Eventually, there's councils talking about, was Jesus the Son of God, or was he just, who was he? Was he fully man, or was he fully God, or was he both? So this sort of set a trend of the church coming together to work out the new, doctrinal issues that would come up with a new religion. Okay, what do we do with this? We haven't really thought about this. What does this mean? And so this sort of set the trend for that. Come together, talk about it, look at Scripture and see what the truth is. So, number 9, what important verse in Acts 10 comes to your mind when you read verses 8 through 9 of Acts 15? Brandon, you had, do not call anything impure that God has made clean. Colin, you challenged this, and you're both right. I would say, Brandon, you aren't wrong on this at all. But there's probably, Colin, you didn't challenge this, Tim did, sorry. Tim had said...
No, it was me. It was me and Tim.
Okay. Tim had suggested Acts 10, 34 through 35.
Yeah.
And that is probably the better one, but it's talking about the same thing essentially. So, hold on. Does somebody want to read that?
That's only like half the verse too, so.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, that's only like half the verse.
Hold on here, I'll read 34 and 35. So Peter opened his mouth and said, truly I understand that God shows no partiality, but in every nation, anyone who fears him and does what is right is acceptable to him. Let's see here. Sorry, I lost my place here. And so I want to talk about why would the Jews view Gentiles as unclean? Was it just that they were so much better than them? Chris?
Some of them they thought of themselves as like the ultimate. They're God's people. No one else is God's people. Only we are.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why they thought no one else could be saved in that sense.
Yeah, that is definitely part of it. What kind of laws were some of the Mosaic laws? What was a big theme, I guess? What was the law helped you get what before God?
Favoritism or favor before God.
Somewhat, yes.
Was it like time of circumcision?
Think about like especially in Leviticus, it talks a lot about how the priest will get people a certain way. What is this that it talks about? Anybody? It talks about getting clean, right? Here's how you go through the purification laws. Here's how you get clean and right before God. And so, they had to do all these different things just to get clean before they could enter the temple, or before they could do this or that, right? So, try to think, it sounds a little harsh for Jews to think of Gentiles as unclean, but think about where they're coming from. Well, they don't follow the Mosaic law, so if we are doing all these laws to get clean, the Gentiles aren't, therefore what? They're unclean, right? So, it's just something to think about. Now, obviously they aren't right, okay? And this is why God is bringing this up. Peter, who is an apostle, right? Peter, anything I have made is not, unfit, right, for eating. And so he's saying, I can use anyone, and again, this is just going into further detail and depth of the faith now being open to non-Jewish believers. Okay? Salvation is for everyone, not just you Jews. Okay? And that brings up an interesting question then. So what's the benefit of being a Jew? And Paul talks about that in Romans, right? Romans 3 or 4, I forget. So, number 10. Not clean. There you go. How is everyone's heart purified? By the faith.
You said by a faith?
Or, well, what I said by the Christian faith. Yeah, what I didn't say by the Christian faith, I said by God through Jesus, because there are actually Christians who believe that Jesus is not the way that you can get to heaven through almost any religion. So, I just thought by the faith was a little vague.
They're not
Yeah.
really Christians.
And this is something I was going to talk about.
No, it's
So, Colin, you challenged this. Brandon, what did you do? Do you remember?
I think I went to the verse.
Exactly. Brandon, you held strong. You knew that, hey, I just read this. I got it straight out of Scripture. So you went to Scripture and said, here it is. Here's where I got this. That's part of knowing your sources, like I was talking about. Knowing where you got your information. But more importantly, guys, when a disagreement comes up, if you're able to go to Scripture and just nip it in the bud, hey, here's where I read it. You can't really argue with Scripture, right? So,
I can read the verse right now.
you can read it. Go ahead.
He made no distinction between us and them, for he purified their hearts by faith.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, technically you edit, but it's fine. I'm sure. Okay, but yeah, so I wanted to commend you on that, because anytime you're able to just go to Scripture, you can end any argument that way. So, anybody that's challenged that, you just go right there. So, how are some of these Jews testing God? By saying circumcision is necessary in order to be saved, which goes against the thought that faith is only needed. Colin, you challenged us too.
Yeah, I was saying that, I said that in verse 10 it says nothing about circumcision. It says the yokes that they could not bear. And then in later questions it refers to the yoke, so.
Okay. Let me ask you a question, Colin. What is this yoke of difficulty? What is it that they're trying to place upon the Gentiles?
Circumcision.
So that would be the yoke, right?
Yeah.
So you guys didn't disagree. You were just going with the analogy being used, and Brandon had the specific thing that they're actually putting out. So it's not, yeah, it is right. It is specifically referring to the yoke for your workbook, but both answers work. So circumcision, guys, was the difficulty, right? That is not a fun process. Okay. This is not something that they wanted to do. So for them to say, hey, you need to do this in order to be saved, and all the apostles are thinking, no, that's not how that works. And we should not put them through this in order to be saved, because they're saved by faith alone, right? So, so circumcision was the yoke, the difficult yoke being placed on the Gentiles. Do we have all the, is this the answer for all three? Okay, what yoke is mentioned here? Okay, so yeah, it's the circumcision there.
So wait, so not the burden? Wait, is that right?
Yes, this is also right.
Okay, the question's.
The burden is circumcision. Right. It's something that they didn't actually have to go through, but some Jews were saying, hey, you do need to go through this. So, yeah, I don't think you guys will need to edit any of that, because it's correct. So. Okay, what is a literal yoke, and why do you think Peter uses this particular figure of speech?
So the reason why I think I have this one right is because I looked at what does it mean.
Okay.
Very well.
So you're going to use it right from the workbook. So, yeah, we have the literal yoke, right? That was the bar that sort of kept the ox together. And so it talks about having an even yoke too, especially it talks about marriage. Okay, you don't want to have somebody that, I guess, more of a believer or less of a believer than you. You don't want somebody who's basically an infant Christian and you've been serving the Lord for 15 years, right? It's uneven if you're going to be at totally different parts of your life. And so this isn't the only time the yoke is referred to. Here it's talking about if you put a heavy one on them, right? That you just don't need it. So he uses this part of speech because it is a good representation of the burden that the disciples have been given. That is true. So does everybody have this? Okay. Okay, according to Peter, can any physical act save us? Right. You want to talk about this now?
Yeah, so this one, no, it is not true. I'm not sure why he put that. It's, I think it was because,
We saw a list, right?
yeah, I saw a list of like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But I do want to commend you because you admitted, oh, I don't know why I said that, and it was wrong. And you said that you'll correct it. As a teacher, and I was telling you about this, in the 6th grade Bible class, I made a pretty big mistake as far as knows. I had, talking about the kingdom splitting, I had gotten it all backward, and I had to spend another day and a half, maybe even a full 2 days, re-explaining everything, because I had just been talking to them for a full day and a half, the exact opposite of what actually happened.
Yeah.
Mistakes happen.
And what was also really weird about that is because I put down no, and then I decided a completely different reason. I got there. It was really weird.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, some of this is just double checking. Some of it is your head is just not in the right place when you're doing this, right? So that's a pretty easy question if you just ask yourself that. But then if you see this list, oh, okay, so then you just add that list. It must be yes. So why did they have that list? What was the list there for?
It was for the list.
What was the purpose of including that, Colin?
Well, the people that Peter was writing to, they were formerly regarded as Christians, but then they began to waver from the path of what Christians should be doing.
Yeah.
So for some of them, it may have been they totally turned their backs on the Christian ways, and for some of it, they may have been misguided. So he's basically giving them these rules to get them back on track to give them another boost start.
Who is this letter written to? You guys remember? Brandon?
The Gentile believers in Antioch, Syria, and Cilicia.
Perfect. Yes. So if you notice this list, okay, abstain from food polluted by idols, from the meat of strangled animals, and from blood,